Good day, YouTube land. Today I'm doing a few little tweaks on my little Fender amps, Princeton Reverb and Vibro Champ, and I figured I'd take you all along for the ride. I'm doing a bit of a repair. This treble knob shaft is broken off, and this Vibro Champ, I'm never really happy with the sound of it. So I have a few little tweaks where I'm gonna mod this and use the leftover part to repair this. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about these two amps. Okay, so this is about a 1977 Vibro Champ. They're actually both from about the same year. I think they were around 1977. This one I got in really terrible condition. Yeah, so this one I got in really terrible condition. When I got it, there was no speaker. The grill was missing. The chipboard baffle behind that grill was completely deteriorated. Knobs missing, and as you see, pretty much all of the text is gone. And it was missing a power transformer. So, as you see, I really put a lot into it. New grill, new baffle. I modified the baffle to hold a 10-inch speaker instead of an 8-inch speaker, which is why you see such a big speaker in the back here. That's an Eminence 10-inch there. It's a very tight fit. It's pretty much shoehorned in there. But my repairs got it up and running, and it's a great sized, pretty loud little amp. However, I'm not really happy with the way it sounds because it has a treble and bass knob. Doesn't have a mid knob, but the natural tone of it is a very boxy, low mids heavy sound with not much bass, which I don't like at all. I'll move on to this next amp here. This is my favorite amp I've ever had. Definitely the most amount of mileage of my playing. Again, this is one I got in terrible condition. Replaced some little fixtures around the edges, added these little corners here, replaced the grill and the speaker. I also got this without a power transformer. Right, so once I got this, I changed the speaker, I changed the power transformer. It was just up and running at that point. And as time went by, I realized I played this amp more than anything else. I used it for years and years and years as a workshop house amp, testing things that I'm working on all the time. And eventually when I started back jamming, I ended up taking this to jam all the time. I have a Fane 10-inch speaker in there, Classics 1070. I did not like the original. Original is really a small, awful little thing. But this amp has a very big bassy sound. Also, overall smooth tone. Works very well with pedals. I don't like my Deluxe Reverb as much because I find with my pedals the Deluxe Reverb has a more fuzzy tone when I use my overdrive and distortion pedals, where this one, it just sounds the way the pedal should sound. So this is my favorite. However, going to a jam recently, this must have bumped into something, maybe in the trunk of my car or some point during the night, and this is just broken off and disappeared. So let me talk about the next thing that I want to do with these amps tonight. Okay, so I'm just straighten that board. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to do here is illustrate that the big tonal difference, the big tone stack difference between these two amps is that they have different mid-range resistors. On a Fender that has treble and bass controls with no mid-range, there's a fixed resistor attached to the back of the bass pot, I think, that substitutes for a mid potentiometer. So that's fixed at 6800 ohms, and that's on most amps that don't have the mid control, like a Super Reverb normal channel, Deluxe Reverb both channels, Princeton Reverb, and any others that are missing a mid control. Over on a Vibro Champ, however, they have that particular resistor as 18,000 instead of 6,800. So naturally, what this does is bring up the mid-range, and if you were to look at the curves, you would see more of a mid scoop on this one, and still a mid scoop, but not much of a mid scoop on this one, right? So this, I think, is large value. It's giving me that boxy low mid sound that I don't like about my Vibro Champ. I'm sure a lot of people like their Vibro Champs, but I don't like mine, right? So this moves me to want to lower this value to this one over here, okay? And that's one of the things I'm doing tonight. However, I have another bird to kill with that stone. My tone pot on my Princeton is missing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to steal the tone pot from the Vibro Champ, and I'm going to put it into my Princeton Reverb. So I'm just transplanting a 250K pot from one amp to the other. In this amp, I'm going to install a push-pull pot, which is regular pot, same 250K value, but it's got these contacts on here that act as a push-pull switch. I'm going to put that into the Vibro Champ, and using the contacts on this push-pull pot, I'm going to attach the two different values of mid-range pot, so my Vibro Champ will have a treble control that will give me a mid-shift, right? I can have it either that the stock value is in, or the Princeton value is in, whichever, it doesn't really matter to me. And that is just the two different things I wanted to do to these amps, and I'm doing that at the same time tonight. Okay, so here we have the inside of a late 70s Princeton Reverb, and it's had routine maintenance. The one mod you can see here is putting in a bias pot, which they don't have from new, and then there's a couple of little capacitors that have been changed, right, which is normal routine maintenance. That one there, that little resistor there, I don't know why I changed that, but I did. Oh yeah, it's usually too low on a silver face, right? That and then this can is actually original. Usually this is changed. This brown thing here is that Mallory labeled can in there, and somehow this one is still good, so it's still kicking, right? Okay, so what I'm gonna do is show you the parts I mentioned just now. Is this resistor here? That's the 6800 ohm resistor that substitutes for a mid pot. This is the volume, this is the broken treble, and this is the bass with that mid pot there, mid pot substitute, right? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out. I have to throw that away, and the one from the Vibro Champ is going to go in here. Now the inside of these amps is always the same on a Princeton Reverb, whether it's a black face or a silver face. They never actually change the schematics. I think maybe they changed the rectifier tube at some point, going from black face to silver face. But generally, other than the difference in the wires and the appearance of these signal capacitors, they have the same schematic as far as anything I've discussed. Okay, let's move on and look at the Vibro Champ. Okay, here we are looking inside the Vibro Champ. On Champs and Vibro Champs, they didn't put any controls on the back. They just had this plain back. And any things like the fuse holder and the power cord connector and so on were all done on the underneath of the back edge. Now this one I've modified a bit. Not really circuit-wise. I would just change a lot of the components because I felt that they needed replacing. This is also a replacement power transformer. You could see by the fresh wires here. Those two new parts that's part of the biasing of the output tube, right? I think I raised that component from 470 ohms to 1000 ohms, which is just about right to get your 6v6 output tube in a very well behaved level of current. You can see most of these have been changed. My problem with this amp has always been that I did not find I got any bass out of it, right? You just hit that low E string and you hear that kind of boxy low mids, but no bass. So I tried to change these capacitors as time went by to improve that, but I think I always ended up just putting back the original values. There may be one or two here that are higher than the normal value. Okay, so peeping in again. Shit, I don't have my flash. Oh, here's a flashlight. Okay, so here we see that resistor there, which is not in focus, but it's okay, we don't need to focus on it. That is the mid-substitute resistor, which, as I mentioned, is 18,000 ohms. It may have drifted in value, but that's the one that I'm going to replace with a lower value, 6,800, which is going to give me more of the mid-scoop that I expect to hear from a silver face Fender. Okay, and this part is going to be doing that switching. This is where that double pot is going to go. I hope it fits. First things first, I'm going to have to see if it fits, right? But this switch will hold the two resistors, this original one and a new 6800 that I'll scrounge up from my parts bin. Right, so my soldering iron is hot. Let me start taking off the pot and loosening up all the relevant connections. Okay, so this is going to be a pretty tight fit going in, but what I've done is I've put two new resistors, the quarter watt carbon metal film, which is what I usually use on my pedals. I wish the camera would focus, that would be really cool. Okay, but anyway, right, so I had to put, gosh, why wouldn't it focus? Why wouldn't it do that? Yeah, all right, whatever. So anyway, so this blue wire here is going to go across to the lug on the base pot where the old 18,000 resistors, and I'm going to unsolder and leave that thing hanging in the air. I'm not going to remove it. And then the ends of these, I just need to attach both ends of these to ground, which will go on the circuit board right behind this pot. Right now, this is quite hard to shoehorn in, but I think if I just mess around with it enough, it should fit in and sit nice and neat the way those are. There's no reason it shouldn't sit down the same way. However, the connectors for the actual pot function, which are these three on top here, are going to kind of bend over onto where these resistors come out. So I have to make sure those things don't bump into each other. Right, sorry, I'm moving things around very sloppy, but I'm literally to film and concentrate on doing all this stuff at the same time, and explaining it is getting the better of me. All right, so let me just show you here now. So I just need to unsolder these three wires here, and then I'm going to solder those wires onto these three lugs here. Again, sorry, my phone is just not focusing well. You get the idea though. Right, so I've unsoldered this, and this pot is going to go as the brand new replacement pot in my busted Princeton Reverb treble knob position. Here we have the three wires freed up, these three here, and yes, they go in that order. And let me solder onto that and then slip that thing in. Okay, so that's in, but it barely fits. I don't even know if I could really recommend to anyone to use that pot, because in most Fenders there's a brass strip that runs on the inside here behind the pots. You can see it on the Princeton here, that brass strip. And I think if this had that brass strip, I don't even know if I would have been able to shoehorn that thing up in there. But it fits, and it's kind of cocked over at an angle so that the plastic molding allows the pot just to sit at the right angle. It doesn't even look that it's sitting at the right same angle as the others, but it looks fine on the outside here. Right, and okay, so this will get its normal knob back on, and this will now become a push-pull pot. Right, okay, so what I'm going to do now is disconnect that resistor here, and I'm just going to lay it to this side, out of the way. and then I'm going to connect this little blue wire to that lug, and then I'm going to connect these two bare wire ends to this group of ground connections here. Okay, so it's all in. Not the neatest thing in the world, but who really cares? Okay, so that blue wire, no, I'm not going to bother with that flashlight. This blue wire here, man, why wouldn't this thing focus? Come on. All right, here we go. Right, so that goes to that common connection, and those two resistors go to this ground here. You can see the wire going off to the chassis, and really a bit of a squeeze for a Fender, but I mean, you know, as I mentioned, compared to building pedals and stuff, this is nothing. And then I have to make sure that these three contacts here don't touch any of those things below, and nothing touches anything else that it's not supposed to. Okay, right, so that's done. So I'm gonna finish this up, just put this back in his cab, etc., and get to putting this into the Princeton Reverb. Right, now looking into the Princeton Reverb, which I love so much, you will see that it actually has quite a breezy, spacious layout. If you observe a Princeton or Princeton Reverb's knobs, which will be 5 or 6 knobs, they are more spaced out than any of the other Fenders, because usually Fenders have crammed both a normal and reverb and tremolo channel into the front panel, so they're very crowded. But this one actually has a spacious layout. So again, I'm going to just take this out and put it back in as a direct replacement of this part here. I'm not doing any mid shifting or tone tweaking or anything. I just love this amp the way it is. Right, no tweaking. Okay, so let me take that old pot out. I'm having a close look at the pots, and I'm starting to wonder if I haven't changed this pot before. If you look at it, the one that just came out, which is on the left, has no markings on the back. The markings are for 1977, but they're written around the sides. Again, I wish this would focus, but it is not. Anyway, this one that I'm putting in, this came out of the Vibro Champ. Structurally, it all looks the same, but the markings are now right on the back here, which goes with the rest of the pots in the amp. The pots in the amp have markings closer. They have a bit of both. They have a bit of both. They have a bit of both. So anyway, these are about the same age. So I'm just putting this back in here, and I'm going to wire that up. Okay, so that pot is back in. Again, I mentioned that the knob broke off and went missing. And so, you know, I have to dip into my stash of Fender knobs to find one that has just the right look. So I'm going to fish through that and just put one on the shaft here. But pretty much a straight swap. Will be really cool if this camera ever focused. Really don't know what's going on. There we go. Okay, so it just occurred to me why those pots were looking a bit different. I just realized that this one had the knurl shaft, which has a press-on type knob. If you look, you would see little splines. Of course, we can't because the camera is not focusing. But basically, there's push-on knobs, and there's ones that are fixed with a set screw, like what you see here. And of course, I don't really have such a good-looking one that matches the others. My stash of old knobs here is not as good as it should be. Anyway, I've got a new knob on there. This one has a hex set screw for some reason. Okay, so that's done, and I'm gonna put this back in the chassis, not expecting to hear any differences. But on that one, the Vibro Champ is where I want to evaluate the push-pull pot and listen to some differences. I was just going to take a little look in here. I could see that I've changed some of the tremolo caps. Really awesome sounding amp. I'm actually going to do a little review to see what I have done, because If there's anything different to the stock values, I want to know about it, because it's a really magic amp. Okay, so I'm just gonna shut this off until I play the amps. Actually, while we're at it, I am going to mention a few mods that I've done to this amp now that I'm looking at it. I could see that I've gone through this and replaced a few 1 meg resistors in this area, which is where the vibrato is. Also where the, I think, vibrato input to the phase inverter, I think. 3 1 meg resistors were changed. So obviously I would have measured those in the past and realized that those had probably drifted too high. I can't particularly remember why I changed these, but there they are. This blue one, okay, so on a late Silverface amp, the cathode of the reverb driver tube, which is this one here, the cathode would have a 680 ohm resistor, right, which is way too low of a value. It causes that tube to run too hard, right, pull too much current, and what happens is that resistor burns out, or the tube burns out, and or the reverb transformer could burn out, right? So a very good practice, I do it on all the Silverface amps I come across, is I change this 680 value to the earlier value of 1.5K, which is generally bypassed with a cathode capacitor like this one here. So normally, if this were a black face, you'd see one of these sitting across here as well. But this one, I've put a 1K resistor instead of the 680 ohm. Okay, so that's the one little reverb mod I always do. I don't think I needed to put the bypass cap there, and it sounds fine, so I'm not going to change it. Underneath here, I was jamming a lot, and I was kind of worrying if I was getting enough of a bassy tone out of this amp in the jams that I was doing. So I rolled the dice a bit, and I bought a deluxe reverb output transformer. This particular one came from Hammond, and it included 4 ohm and 8 ohm output taps. Actually, it has 4, 8, and 16 ohms. Okay. Now, Princeton would usually just have 8 ohms only. Now, because I had that extra impedance taps, I use the old ground switch, which is you generally disable on these amps, right? And I changed that into an 8 and 4 ohm selector switch. You can see them crudely labeled here. So this one, actually, this would be the stock internal speaker, and if I put in another 8 ohm cab into this extension, I will flick this over to 4 ohms, right? And this bigger transformer, in theory, would give you a clearer bass, or maybe a higher threshold of volume and bass before starting to distort and so on. But the truth be told, I never really heard a difference in tone when I changed over to this transformer, even though it's much bigger. I'm going to grab the old original one because I think it's sitting nearby here. I think this is the original. Oh, it's somewhere here. Right, this is the original transformer here. This is original Princeton 15 watt. Is it 15 or 12? The amp says 12. Okay, so this is the original transformer. And let's take a closer look at the two. Sorry, this bench is very messy. Yeah, so here we go. This is the Hammond one that has 4, 8, and 16 options. Why does my camera look so terrible? Anyway, this is the original one. Okay, so it's taller, it's wider, it's longer, it's a bigger core. But I'll tell you what, this sounded just as good as this does now. I only really bought it to see if there was going to be an improvement in the clarity or a bigger bass sound, and I liked having the extra impedance selectors. So I just didn't hear a difference between the two. This is why this has remained, because this sounded so good. I mean, I really was happy with it, to be honest. But this has survived in here simply because there was no damn difference in tone. Even though I know it's it's a common upgrade. This is the original can capacitor. I don't know how the hell this has survived so long, but it has survived. Several other amps, well, including that one, I have replaced the electrolytic can here. And in the bigger models, this filter setup lives here underneath one of those dog houses, which I'm sure you've seen if you've ever worked on an old Fender. There's a can that sits in this area, and there's a black insulator, and you have all of the filters living under that can. In this case, it's done all in 4 sections in this multi-can, and these multi-cans last really long. They last longer than the individual cans in the big amps. So this has survived, and I can see, I'll be very honest, when I look at this, I'm just showing you with a picker, if you look down in here, you can see if there's a swelling or any crusty stuff leaking out of here, it needs to be replaced. I look at it, I don't see any crusty leaks, but I can see that it's just beginning to swell. Right, so I will keep in mind that I've got to change this soon. If I start to hear any funny sounds, any humming and so on, I know I've got to change this. I actually already bought a replacement for this a while ago, and I just never needed to put it in. Right, so that's all I've ever done with this amp. This is my favorite amp, and I have a lot of amps. Look at all those Fenders down there, and I have a wall over there of Marshall high watt trainer, Ampegs, Blackface, Bassman, all kind of stuff. And this gets used the most. Another quick look in the back of the Princeton. Here we have a label I just leave in the amps that I've refurbished. Fender Princeton Reverb, 1977, service electronics upgraded, transformer, 10-inch speaker, 15 watts of power. This speaker is a magic speaker. It just sounds awesome. I don't argue with it. I have no intention of changing it. It's a Fane 10-inch. I've also changed these reverb wires, I think. Also too, this cab has some termite damage. If I stick my finger around here, I could feel this termite damage. But again, it just keeps running and it keeps sounding awesome. Maybe that adds to the tone. Yeah, you can see here. Somewhere around there's areas that you can squeeze and feel some damage. Awesome speaker. If you know the whole world of YouTube is looking, I hope. If you know more about these, or if you know what is a modern equivalent to these, or if you have one of these you want to sell to me, let me know. It's just so nice. If that blew, I would be broken-hearted. Okay, so there's our amp, and I'm just trying to get some impression of the difference in that settings on the treble knob. I can hear it clearly, but I still don't like how the amp sounds. Let's illustrate. This is the stock setting. It's pressed in, and I'm going to put them on 5 each, volume at about 3.5. I'll just put it on 4. The tremolo's off. On this amp, the tremolo is always on. It's a very nice tremolo, but turning it down effectively has it off. Okay, so that's 4 on the volume, 5 and 5 on the treble and the bass, with the original value of mid-range resistor. And I'm going to pull it out. I do hear a difference.